Hello, I'm Scott Harris, and welcome to the 28th episode of Naturally Scott, our podcast. This is just so much fun for me. I keep saying that, but it's true. Every one of them is true. I just finished this recording. Oftentimes, I don't do the introduction until a couple days later, but I just finished this recording with Susie Spikol. That's S-P-I-K-O-L, but you pronounce it pickle with an S, Spikol. And she is a fascinating woman. She's a naturalist, but she is an author, and she has written a couple of books, the Book of Fairies, which came out just recently, and Forest Magic for Kids, which came out earlier this year. They're great books. They're books for children, but frankly, they're books for adults as well. And to have you open up windows with your children and your grandchildren and see things outside. She writes about fairies and gnomes and giants and also regular science. And there's experiments and things that you can do. It's an absolute blast. We talk about Hancock, New Hampshire a lot, which if you're not familiar with Hancock, New Hampshire, it turns out it is the naturalist center of the world. So it's kind of a blast. So I'm telling you, stay tuned. Let me introduce you to Susie and let her introduce you to the worlds of fairies and gnomes and giants. Enjoy the podcast. Have a great day. And as always, stay curious. Hello and welcome to Naturally Scott. I'm Scott Harris, your host. And today you can see or you can hear in a moment Susie Spikol. Now, just so we're clear, it's Spikol, like pickle with an S. It's spelled S-P-I-K-O-L. I had it in my head that it was Spikol. Susie had mentioned to me before that we started recording that her life would have been easier if it was. But Spikol it is, starting today and into the future. Susie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Scott. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm excited.
Well, I think we're going to have fun. I loved your books. We're going to talk about them. I believe that it's fair to introduce you, and I want to get this right, as an author, a storyteller, an educator, a naturalist, and a believer in children and fairies and magic.
Yeah, that is 100% true. That's great. I think I'll make that my new introduction at all events.
There we go. All right. We have a lot to talk about, a lot to cover, but let's go ahead and start with your books. Now, you were kind enough to send them to me, and two of them, by the way, I have to tell you, you have a great smile and terrific glasses. I love those glasses.
They're really big. I feel like when I wear them, it makes me feel like I'm an owl, which is not a bad thing. I'm a big fan of owls, but yeah, they're my new glasses.
And I might be glass conscious because I stopped and picked up 4 pair of old people glasses last night. My first ones. I'm 68. So I got, what did I get? I got nighttime driving glasses. I got daytime sunglasses for the car and for the boat. I got reading glasses.
Man.
I invested my life savings in glasses yesterday.
Don't lose them.
Yeah, so hopefully I'll be able to see in the future, which I think would be a bonus for me and the other drivers on the road who might not have known the challenges I had in progressing forward. All right, but let's back up to you. You've released 2 books this year, which is pretty darn impressive. And I've got them here in my hands, but we'll throw the covers up during the podcast when we go into production, so they'll be there. But we have, the newest is the Book of Fairies.
Yes.
And the one that is now old because it was released earlier this year is Forest Magic for Kids, as subtitled, How to Find Fairies, Make a Secret Fort, and Cook Up an Elfin Picnic.
Yes, yes.
We're going to talk about both of these, but why don't we start with the newest one? Let's start with the Book of Fairies. Tell us about your book.
Oh my goodness. First of all, writing the Book of Fairies was a dream come true for me. I have been working on that book since I was 8 years old. When I wrote
almost 20 years ago?
Yeah, just 20 years ago. When I first wrote it, my first edition, I have always been really interested in fairies and magic, and that was kind of fed to me through reading and through storytelling. My mom was a great storyteller and a big imagination. And I wanted to write a book for kids that like to spend time outside looking for magical things like fairies or gnomes. And so the Book of Fairies is made up of fairies that are from folklore from Eastern and Western Europe. So a lot from the United Kingdom and some from my family's kind of background, which is from the Ukraine and kind of the Slavic tradition. And then in it, interspersed are fairies that when I was a kid, I made up to explain kind of natural things that I noticed that I didn't have scientific explanations for. So for example, there's the bubblinis, in the Book of Fairies, and the bubblinis are fairies I invented when I was a kid after blowing bubbles. Have you ever noticed there's rainbows inside the bubbles when you blow them?
I had noticed it, and then you reminded me of it when I read the book, and I thought,
Yeah.
I have not thought of that in a long time,
Yeah.
but it is there.
Yeah, and so, if you're a kid and you don't really know why is there a rainbow inside a bubble and you don't understand, prism and light and all of that, I came up with my own answer, and that was that each bubble has a little family of bubblini fairies that lived in it. So that's just one example. So interspersed through the book are fairies from folklore, traditional folklore, and then fairies of my own invention. And I'm hoping when families and kids read it, they'll feel excited to invent their own fairies too.
I think that's great. Now, you mentioned that these come from Eastern and Western Europe, and then from
Yes.
your own childhood and your own imagination. Do we not have here in the United States, do we not have a good fairy background? Is that not something that
Oh, we
we,
do. We do. I
okay,
mean, fairies actually are cross cultural. They appear in lots of different cultures across the world. And much of our fairy folklore that we have here in the US is kind of imported from our immigrant background. So people who came from the United Kingdom or Scotland, Ireland, England, they brought their traditions with them. My family from Ukraine brought their traditions, and those stories sort of lived here. But Native people had fairies too, little people. There's a great writer, I can't remember his last name, but I have his book. He has the Fairies of New England and the Fairies of New York. And these are for adults, these books. They're actual like accounts of fairies from throughout history in the New England area and then in New York. And I wish I could remember the guy's last name. His first name is Andrew, but check it
you
out.
know what?
Fairies of New York.
We will look it up, and I'll throw a picture of the cover up here. So I have 1,000 questions, but the one that I have to ask, because you talk about these fairies so passionately, do you believe in fairies outside of your imagination?
Great question. Yeah, I do believe in fairies outside my own imagination and outside the folklore. I always feel that within folklore and mythology and legends, there are kernels of truth. And I'm open to the idea that there might be things that we don't really perceive every day, but are out there. And you just have to be open to it. Have I ever seen a fairy? No. I'm still
Not yet.
waiting. Not yet. I'm still
Not yet.
hopeful. And I kind of love that there's this mystery still. To me, we believe in a lot of things in our world that we can't see, and we just have implicit faith that these things exist. So why not fairies?
Well, I don't have an answer to that. I'm not even looking for one, but certainly one doesn't come to mind.
I mean, what about you? Do you believe in fairies outside
I don't,
imagination?
I'll tell you what, I don't know that I would put the word fairies on that belief. But if you're asking me if I believe in things that we can't see, I very much do.
Yeah.
I am not a what you would call a religious person, but I'm definitely a spiritual person. And I think there's a certain amount of hubris and arrogance to believing that the only things that can possibly exist are the things that we can see and touch and feel. And
So well
so
said.
and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a god or if it's fairies or whatever it is, and I don't know that it matters. I
Right.
think that
Right.
I think that if you are imbued with curiosity and imagination and belief and passion, whether that comes from your parents or your friends or inside of you or outside of you in something you can, or you mentioned a love of owls when I complimented your glasses, or from something that inspires you that you can see. I'm looking out over a lake. We live on a lake here, and I'm
Mhm.
watching birds fly and squirrels run, and that does bring magic to my life. And
Exactly.
and I know that I'm gonna call it your real life, your other life, that you're a naturalist as well. And we're gonna talk about that, the Harris Center and all
Yeah.
those things. But I love that a woman of science and obvious intelligence can still hold out a hope and a belief and a prayer, if you will, that these things exist in our life. And I don't know, maybe they only exist in our imagination, but isn't that still existing?
Exactly.
I mean,
That's so good.
my grandparents and my parents have passed, but they still exist for me.
Right.
I don't know where they are or what they're doing. If my mom's listening now, she's critiquing my English. and she's enjoying the podcast and enjoying you, but she's critiquing my speaking ability. But they still exist in a way. And I have two grandkids, hopefully to have more. But I believe that the ones that aren't here yet exist in some way, somewhere.
Yes.
And if my son and daughter could just get moving, well, that's not fair. My daughter has a 6-month old. So no pressure, honey. But yeah, so yes, the long answer to your short question is I do believe in things that we can't see. And I
Yeah.
don't know if they're gods or aliens or fairies, but I don't know that we need to know. I think part
Right.
of the magic of the books that you've written and kind of the foundation of where you came from is I think we need those stories. I think we need to think about things that we can't see and we can't
Yeah.
touch and feel, and yet impact our. I can't wait to read these books to my grandson.
Aw.
He's 4.5, and I am so excited about that. I'm also rambling, so my mom just sent me a note, and the podcast is about you, so we're gonna stop me and start you. You wrote about yourself, if I have this correct, you always looked for where nature and story met, which I believe is your storytelling/scientist combination, right?
Yes.
So, and you mentioned that you started writing as a child. Take us back. When
Sure.
when was your first fairy or magical thought, and when did you first put crayon to paper or pen to paper and start to make those notes that turned out to be, and I'll put up good copies, but turned out to be these books?
Yeah, so great. Well, although I'm a naturalist now and I live in a very rural place in southwestern New Hampshire, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, which is very far from anything wild and really right in the middle of Brooklyn, like the center
Okay.
of it.
I'm sorry. I have to rudely interrupt you. I just finished writing a book called Why We Love Birds. And I interviewed 52 birders from around the country, some of them who you know, Cy Montgomery and Julie Brown, right?
Oh my
And
gosh,
so,
yeah.
yeah, so it's a fun book. But two things come to mind when you start this. Number one, I believe that and I am going to go through and look because when the guests that shared where they were born and raised, the majority of them were from Brooklyn.
Aha,
There
that's
were a
great.
large number of people where Brooklyn played a role or continues to play a role in their life. And then there's
Wow.
kind of a quirky thing in New Hampshire because with my podcast, Cy Montgomery and Julie Brown and you and Matt Patterson
Yes.
have all been guests in the book or the podcast or both. And don't you all live within spitting
Yes.
distance of each other?
Yes, we're all friends. We all live in the same little town. It's such a pretty town, Scott. You'll have to come visit. It's Hancock, New Hampshire. It isn't, and it doesn't just have us. It has other incredible naturalists like Eric Masterson, who is an incredible birder, and Julie Brown's husband, Phil Brown, who is the bird conservation director at the organization I work for. So maybe it's something in the water. We always think there's some sort of magnetic pull that pulls naturalists to Hancock, but we have great times together. We go out walking and look for things and naturalize together. So, yes. And I love that you mentioned that so many people you interviewed for your book have a connection to Brooklyn. And when I grew up in Brooklyn, it wasn't the Brooklyn it is today. It was rough. It was gritty. It was a little bit dangerous, but my parents were really wonderful at finding the natural places for us to visit. And we would go to Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge in Queens, and we would go to Central Park to go see birds, and we would go to Prospect Park and the botanical gardens that were there. So even though, Brooklyn has got a lot of concrete, there's these little kind of oases of wildlife. And I can remember really being pulled that way. And I wasn't pulled by science. I was pulled by story. I was an avid reader and read a lot of books that had fantasy elements to it. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Thumbelina, the fairy tales. And I just thought, well, everything exciting in those books happens outside. So that must be where the magic is. So I spent a lot of time outside looking for, a door to another world like in Narnia, or a tiny little person like Thumbelina, or, that there was gnomes living in the cracks, or that the rats could talk like the Rats of Nim and Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. So for me, it was really a literary kind of experience that pulled me into the natural world. Because while I was searching for those kind of magical things, I discovered, wow, butterflies are start off as caterpillars and then become these butterflies, or frogs, maybe if you kiss a frog, it doesn't turn into a prince, but the fact that it changes from a tadpole into a frog is pretty magical. So
That
that's kind of
is
what pulled
magical.
me. It is magical.
That
It's
is I mean, I
yeah,
kind of understand things that are small and then grow and become larger. But things that
yeah,
start out as an apple and then later in life become a kumquat, I don't understand tadpoles to frogs and
yeah.
caterpillars to butterflies. I mean, as I'm doing this podcast and meeting these fascinating people like yourself, and I'm learning so much, every time I'm just astounded by something that I learn, by something that I see.
Me
And
too.
every once in a while, I think, okay, I've got a bit of a grip now on the natural world, and then no, I don't. And then when somebody like you intrudes in my life and starts to blur the lines between what I know to be true and what I have to believe and think about, and you gray and blur those lines, which is both a challenge and a gift um,
Right.
that you bring. And by the way, I must mention, because in case my wife watches this, she was born in Brooklyn. My wife was born in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
She's a family of Russian Jews,
Yes, me
and those
too.
that survived World War II, and they didn't all, unfortunately, but the ones that did emigrated to Brooklyn and built their family there. And then when she was 3, so 65 years ago, they moved to Southern California. So the ties to Brooklyn, having it come back to this,
Mhm.
and like you
That's right.
mentioned, Jamaica Bay and Central Park. I imagine Chris Cooper,
Yes, of
the
course.
well, those are Jamaica Bay was his childhood and
Yes.
Central Park is his adulthood. If you had to ask Chris to pick between his human relationships, with all due respect to his partner, and his warbler relationships in Central Park, I think his partner would be looking for a new apartment.
That's so funny.
So those things do have a draw to people. Now, in your book, The Book of Fairies, I wrote this down, but I'll just open to a page. For each of them, you talk about the actual fairy, and then you have a spot about their favorite friends.
Yes.
And I love this, how to find them. So pick one, anyone, and it's not a quiz. I'm not challenging you on this, but pick one of your fairies and tell us about it. Tell us about the
Sure.
fairy, tell us about its favorite friends, and then tell us how I can find that fairy or how my
Well,
grandson.
so I mean, the Book of Fairies, I kind of set it up in my mind as a naturalist who spends a lot of time looking at field guides. I really wanted it to be called the Field Guide to Fairies because I set it up in a field guide style so that there's a description of what the fairy is, and the favorite friends is really like its allies, so who it's connected to in the ecosystem of fairies. And then how to find. The book is not just to be read inside, but it's to encourage children to go outside and look for them. And most of the fairies have outdoor elements. There are some that you can look for in your own home, but one of the fairies that I'm really fond of is the knockers. And the knockers are based on fairies from Scotland and Wales, and it's a fairy that lives inside caves. So and they're jokesters. And that's kind of what I love about them when I was researching them. And there's great books to do research on fairies, old from the 18s and some from the 1970s when fairies were really popular. So these fairies, they live in the caves, and they got the name knockers because they would lead miners to treasure by knocking on the inside of the mine. And that's only if the miners left them gifts. And so this got cut out of the book, but many miners would bring a special type of kind of pie that was folded like a crescent called cresses. And they would leave the cresses in the mine for the knockers. And this was really like how people lived. But in my book, because it's for kids too, I added some playful parts that the knockers and the snail get together and have a lot of pranks played with the snail slime. So that's really fun. So lots of animals do not like the knockers because the knockers are pranksters and play jokes on them, but they are allied with the snails, which I love because I love snails. And then if you wanted to find them,
Oh,
I'll
by the
just
way, I
read
have
it.
to tell you, that's a sentence I've never heard in my life before. I love snails.
I do. I love snails and slugs.
Okay.
I love those guys. Who wouldn't love them?
Well, now I
They're
have
one
to
of
rethink my position on snails, which
my
basically has been agnostic.
favorite.
I've been completely indifferent to snails, and now I'm thinking that might be a mistake on my part.
Yeah, really. I mean, well, we'll have to talk about snails after, but I'll just read how to find the knockers. The first thing to ask yourself is if you really want to find one of these little mischief makers. If you do, be prepared to have your ears pulled. If you search for them, bring a basket full of red bandanas and a pocket full of striped socks. I didn't mention this, but they like those things and they're always stealing them from the miners. So if you have them, it helps you out. Give them your gifts and they will invite you deep into their cave to sit around the goblin gold moss, which is a true type of moss that glows in the dark, and trade jokes. But if you're really good at telling jokes, especially knock knock jokes, they might never let you leave. And that's the thing about fairies is there's always an element of kind of beauty and mystery and wanting to see this mysterious fairy, but they're also a little bit dangerous. There's all those folk tales about don't go inside the fairy circle because you'll never get to leave. Don't take a drink from a fairy because you'll have to stay in fairyland forever. So yeah, so the knockers are one of my favorite fairies, and not one that I invented, but one that I have had a fond kind of friendship or awareness of since I was a kid.
Well, thank you for that, and I love
You're
the way that
welcome.
you read. As you were reading, I could see you sit in a library surrounded by 20 kids and parents who were enjoying it just as much. So that's a great thing, and maybe I'll get to see that someday. So,
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the knock knock jokes. I was reading along with you, by the way, page 35, if anybody else has the book and is reading along with Susie. But you do mention the knock knock jokes in the illustration. So I want to ask you about your illustrator, but before I
Oh,
do, you
yeah.
mentioned the 1970s when fairies were popular. Help me
Yeah.
understand that.
So in the 1970s ish, there was an incredible book put out by Brian Froud. I actually have a copy of it. Hang on one second, Scott. It's in my
Sure,
pile.
sure.
All right. I brought over my favorite books. It all kind of started with this book. I didn't bring it. The Book of Gnomes, which you might remember.
I'll put a picture of
Yeah.
the cover up.
So these were by this Book of Gnomes. I mean, my parents had it on a coffee table. It's like a coffee table book. And because I lived in a home that had a lot of field guides and my parents were interested in nature, and this book to me as a kid looked for real. Like it looked like a field guide to gnomes. I just thought, well, they must be real. And then that book kind of spurred a lot of other books. And this is the book that this is my copy from when I was a kid. You can see it's ripped and the pages are falling out. But this book is filled with folklore about fairies. And some of them are scary, like, they don't kind of look a little hobgoblinly. And that's the thing. And I love this book. And I guess it was a hot seller, along with it spurred the Book of Gnomes, spurred like the Book of Giants, which is another book I also love. And that one. So anyway, I guess maybe in the 1970s, there was a lot of interest in fairies. And that doesn't surprise me because kind of fairies, gnomes, giants, they're all kind of protectors of the wild world, the natural world. And the 70s was really the height. It's Earth Day started, and there was a lot about nature being kind of protected, the Endangered Species Act, all of those things, the water protection. So, to have an interest in kind of spirits of the wild world, like fairies and gnomes and giants, as seen as protectors of wildness, made sense. And I think it makes sense again today because our wild world is in trouble. And if we can think about things like fairies or gnomes, maybe it gives us a little bit of hope.
Well, I think that's spectacular. Thank you. And maybe today more than ever is when we need it.
Exactly.
So take us back to your childhood and tell us about your favorite encounters with fairies and magic, and how that blurred with, let's call it, the more traditional flora and fauna,
Yeah.
the touch, feel, and see flora and fauna. So where was that happening? How did that
Yeah. I was so fortunate. My parents were both school teachers from Brooklyn, and they had the summers off, and we had a little summer home in Vermont. And so even though I spent the majority of my childhood growing up in the city, I had every summer 2 months in southern Vermont. And it was there that I was most happy. And that is really where I explored the edges of the meadows in the forest, and that's where I did a lot of my gnome searching and looking for fairies. And my mom, she was a wonderful storyteller, and we would lay out under the stars in the meadow of Vermont on a blanket, and she would spin these stories, and a lot of them were myths of the stars, but then there were fairy tales, and it just sort of fed me. And I can remember really actively looking for fairies in the scraggly edge of the Vermont meadow, and building little fairy homes and leaving gifts for the fairies, and climbing trees and looking for dryads or fairies that might live in the trees. So that's kind of where it really crystallized for me. And during the summer, we didn't have a TV in Vermont, so we did a lot of reading, and I just spent a lot of time in the library and brought home all those fantasy books, and that just kept feeding me and feeding me. So that was really it. That's where it crystallized for
Oh,
me.
I think that's great. Are you a fan of The Hobbit?
Of
Are you a
course, I'm a
Tolkien
fan. I'm
fan?
crazy. Yes, I love The Hobbit. I love The Lord of the Rings. In my Forest Magic book, I have the recipe for lembas, which is a type of bread that the elves would make to take on journeys.
It's one of my notes. I plan on making that with my grandson, the
Yes.
recipe. So I will tell you that for probably 30 years, my Christmas present to myself every year was to reread The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
I would take
that's
that,
so good.
that Christmas period, and that's what I would read, and I loved it. It motivated me in a lot of ways, and the idea that these worlds were out there,
Yeah,
and I like so many of those books, the fantasy books and the science fiction books, the Asimov
yeah,
books and stuff where they create worlds like the Foundation trilogy,
yeah.
it's you look at the Harry Potter books where she created an entire world, and I think that these books are in that vein. So now as a naturalist and as a storyteller and a believer in things that can't be proven, but also can't be disproven, how do you balance storytelling with scientific accuracy?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in my job as a naturalist working with children, and I've been a naturalist now for over 30 years. I have seen sort of children developmentally changing in how they play. And this is going to sound kind of radical, Scott, but I actually think our kids need more time playing outside than they do learning about how it works outside. Feel like my job as a naturalist is to help children build this really healthy, loving relationship with the natural world. And a lot of times for young children, that really starts with their imagination through observation. So if you, with your 4-year-old grandson, maybe when he sees a caterpillar, he asks you, like, where's its mommy? Or it's the mommy. And we know as adults and as naturalists and scientists, caterpillars don't have mommies and their mommies don't stay with them. The fact that a child is sort of saying this because they're making this personal connection. And I think that we need to spend more time with our kids building those personal connections to the natural world, and then the science can follow. And so, really, with my youngest students, I am doing a lot of playing and pretending. We might spend the day as chipmunks. We might build fairy homes and kind of collect tiny little things. And it's all this act of imagination and hands on play and being in the natural world and having your senses kind of turned on by everything that's happening outside. And then as they get older, third and fourth grade, then there's some science you can begin to put in. And then as they're older, yes, more science. But I think we're really desperately missing those foundations. I don't think kids are playing outside the way that I might have played outside as a kid, the way you might have played outside as a kid. They're on screens, they're going to soccer games, they're going to dance class, they're really scheduled. Maybe their neighborhoods aren't safe. Um, there's just there's a different world, I think, that I'm seeing with the students I'm working with.
As a parent and a grandparent, I definitely, and at one point I was a child, I definitely agree with you. And when we're talking about the natural world and science and whatnot, I think there's a lot to be said for rather than, okay, here's a checklist of things we're going to go do when we go on this hike.
Right.
Instead, just let a 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old discover it on their own. But I don't believe that that is isolated just to what we're talking about. I think it's the same thing with books, and I think it's the same thing with sports.
Yeah.
Is if we go out and everything is about drills and here's how you catch a baseball and you have to put your
Exactly.
give them a bat, a glove, a ball, and let the kids go play,
Exactly.
and they'll figure it out. And the same thing, let them choose. I can't even I hate to think about how many kids were turned off from reading by being forced to read Shakespeare before they were mentally prepared.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let them pick a book. Maybe they want fantasy, maybe they want biographies, maybe they want a book about sports, maybe they want a book about music. If you can get them to your point, if you can get them excited about being outdoors, when they're 7, 8, 9, 10, we can say, "Okay, there may not be a Santa Claus in the way that you think there is, but let's see what that did for you. What," and then we can bring it to what we know.
Right.
And, and I think those precious years, those years 3 to 7 or whatever they are,
Yeah.
we could have educators argue for years or whether it's 2 to 8 or 3 to 7, but those years where we need to embrace the imagination.
Yes.
And okay, yes, I understand that you're really into sports and you want to read this book about Pete Rose, but that's not the book that we're reading. We're reading this book. Well, eventually you just turn them off from reading or
Yeah.
nature or sports or
Yep.
whatever it might be. And that's the fear. And to your point, if your books get children outside, and by the way, drag their parents with them,
Yeah.
is get more parents outside. I think it's a great thing. And by the way, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because the thought crossed my mind, it strikes me that in a subtle way, your books are absolutely written as much for adults as they are for children.
100%. What
Okay.
I'm a really big advocate and believer in shared time outside and that kids can really benefit from and families, you know, as parents, we benefit from sharing experiences outside. And something like forest magic for kids, sometimes parents might feel reluctant to go outside because their kid might say like, "What's this tree? What's this bird?" And maybe you don't know. But for forest magic, you don't have to know anything except sort kind of tap into your imagination. It's really about play and playing outside and sharing those times together. And then also knowing as a parent when to sort of step out of the play and let your child play on their own or lead the play. And so I loved what you said about sports and reading. I mean, I think children need opportunities to be the choosers in their world that empowers them. They need lots of time for playing. As family members, as parents or older siblings or grandparents, our role can be to enjoy join them in that, to participate in that. So yes, I did write Forest Magic for Kids and my other book, The Animal Adventurer's Guide, to be done together outside at the beginning. And then as a kid gets older, and I'm thinking 8, 9, 10, that's more, you want your child to also stretch and have those alone times or times with just friends.
Well, and I think you're right. And I was guilty of it. My son is 41 and my daughter's 35, 36. Sorry, honey. Not you, honey, her, honey. But I was definitely guilty of overscheduling the kids. Lessons here and instructors there and, all of those things. And of course, I'm doing it because I think it's the right thing.
Right.
Which most parents do. They do what they think is the right thing.
Yes.
And so I am a much bigger fan for my grandchildren or my grandson. My granddaughter's not old enough yet, but my grandson, throw him out. I'll watch him. I'll be
Yeah,
there. If he's on the lake, of course, I'm there to protect him, but let him direct it. Let him
exactly.
find his own fairies, whatever they are.
Right.
And, a 4-year-old child can find such joy in a small rock on a beach. It can entertain him for a half an hour.
Yeah.
It's amazing if you let them explore.
I
If
think
you
too, it also turns it back to you. Children are seeing the world through beginner's eyes. Everything is new. The rock, the rainbow, the surf, whatever, wherever you are, it's like everything is new. They don't know. And instead of going right into like the science of everything, just let them have that time. And it also can open it up for you again to look at
Yes.
the world through what they're seeing, what they're experiencing. And instead of like correcting information, a lot of times I'll just let that kind of go when they're young because that's their world. They're making sense of the world around them. Just like I didn't know what formed a rainbow inside a bubble, so I invented something that explained it. And when I was older, I figured out what makes the rainbow inside the bubble. But in my heart, I still have the bubblinis.
Well, I'm glad that you do, and I'm glad that you shared them with us. Now, you talked about parents and children and whatnot. Do you think things have really changed since you were a child until today? I mean, it's very cliche to say, oh, parents throw their kids in front of a TV. We didn't When I was growing up, there was a TV in the house, but we were only allowed to watch one show a week. That
Yeah.
was the rule. And when my wife and I were first married, we've married 46 years now. Probably for the first 20 years, we didn't have a television in the house. I'm not saying that that makes us smarter or better than anybody else. And I do enjoy shows now. And I'm not suggesting that people have them or not have them, but not having them motivated me to get outdoors more or talk to my wife more or read more. So do you think things have changed with time, let's say over the last 30 years? And do you find today in your work, both as a writer and as a naturalist, and I swear we're going to get to that. Do you think it's harder to motivate children or to motivate parents?
So such a big question and so many ways to answer it. I guess what I would say is that I have noticed a change in my work. So I do work in a rural community and I spend time outside with kids. That's my job. And at the beginning, when I started back in the 1990s, we were going to hike a mountain. And before we would go, I would just ask kids to raise their hand how many people had ever hiked a mountain before. And like 80 to 90% of the class would raise their hand. Now, when I ask that question, it's a lot less. So from that kind of experience makes me say, yeah, things have changed. And I think some of the changes is when I first moved here, there was still families that could afford to have a parent at home. And now that's really uncommon. And so parents are working really hard and they don't have as much time. And the not having as much time is hard on everybody. How do we spend our leisure time? And do we have enough kind of like energy to go out and hike up a mountain when we've worked 40 or 60 hours a week? So I think that's some of it that goes into it. I think it's screens definitely take up time. I think there's cultural or societal pressure to sign your kids up. They got to play soccer. And then before you know it, they're not just playing in the rec league, but then they're on a travel team. And so there's like this amping up of activities that we think we need to provide for our children for them to be successful. When in fact, I think what we need is kids and families spending more time together, doing things. I'm such an advocate for outside, but I think being outside is really important. I mean, all of the science shows that time spent outside is good for you. It's physically good for you. It decreases your stress hormones. It increases your oxygen levels. It gives you vitamin D. It gives you physical activity and movement. There's studies that show that it improves your ability to focus and it uplifts your mood. And this is like 20 minutes to 2 hours of time outside. And if you can't get outside, science even shows listening to nature sounds or looking out the window can have those types of benefits too. So getting outside it's hardwired in us. The need to connect to outside makes us healthier humans. And that is something that's important for us to think about as families. It's just as important as eating a healthy diet and
Now,
having healthy
for
habits.
you, and I was one of those club dads. My son traveled around the world playing baseball. He played 1,500 games in 8 years, and it was an amazing team. They were the best team in the country for a number of years, and we played all over. And is being outside playing catch or kicking a soccer ball for you, is that being outside?
I think that is good to be outside. That's a way of being outside. So those are the benefits. You're picking up the sunlight. The science is showing that exposure to sunlight through our eyes is really healthy for us. There was just this big study done. I forget which country it was in, but eyesight is improved by people spending time outside and looking near and then far. So, baseball, soccer, field hockey, whatever, all of those things, good.
Fairies, gnomes.
Fairies, like we're fairies and gnomes. But I also feel like a lot of times when, and I mean, I have a 14-year-old son. He's, played soccer and travel team. Yeah, that's what we do here. That's what families are. Oh, you're playing soccer. You got to get on the travel team. Okay, I'm on the travel team. Um, but I also feel like a piece that's missing is unstructured time outside,
Mhm.
and that unsupervised by adult time. When I was a kid growing up in Brooklyn, we didn't have parents telling us how to play stickball or stoop ball or whatever, or handball. We just played it. We made up our rules. Think of The Sandlot, the movie, and just what you said, give them a baseball and a bat. Let them figure it out. Let them make up their rules. Messing around like that, that's really important. Kids on bicycles that they're, now I'm going to sound really bad. Kids on scooters and bicycles that they're powering by their own body, so healthy for them. So
Yep.
healthy for them. Moving around their world and making a map of what their neighborhood is like, that is really important.
I
That's
think it
where
is.
it
I remember fondly, and I get that I'm the old man and my generation was better, and by God, we worked harder and we were more patriotic and all of those things. But as a young kid, and I'm talking in the 7, 8-year-old range, when Saturday would come, my mother would make us breakfast and then hand me $1 and a sack lunch and point to my bicycle and tell me that she didn't want to see me again till the streetlights came on. And there were no cell phones. We never checked in. We were just gone 10, 12 hours. And
Yes.
of course, if you did that now to a 7-year-old kid, they'd come and take the child away.
Yeah.
Social services would be there. But I think that's wrong. I think, yes, did kids sometimes get lost? Did they occasionally break an arm? Did things? It did. But my God, you looked for. I wasn't looking for gnomes and fairies when I was doing that. I was a herp guy. I was looking for lizards and snakes,
Yeah.
and that's what I was doing, and I was out there forever doing that. We would go steal plywood sheets from construction sites and put them out in the trees and lay them out and then come back a week later and see, what snakes and lizards and
Oh my
insects
gosh.
had grown underneath them. And now parents seem to me, and I don't want to, again, I'm not criticizing all parents, and the world is different, but my God, give them a little bit. Let them pick the
Yeah.
book. Let them pick the sport. Let them pick the couple of hours and go off and do that. And it can be challenging. Now, we could talk about this forever, of course, but what we are going to talk about now is the book you published so long ago, earlier this year, Forest Magic for Kids, which is an activity-based book, right?
Yes.
The
Yes.
subtitle again is How to Find Fairies, Make a Secret Fort, and Cook Up an Elfin Picnic. I will put real cover up there, but you got to look at this. It's just beautiful. So,
So fun.
walk me through one of the activities.
Sure. Well, I think my one of my favorite activities is, I gotta get to it. I love
Tell
the
me what page
activity.
number.
Okay, I will. I'm all about, and this is just from my own experience as a kid and remembering it and spending time with kids. Page 52, I like the potion making. And that's really just kind of some old kitchen stuff outside. Kids love to mix up stuff, and I can remember in my house taking all my mother's spices and mixing them all up and using her hand beater. And she got so mad I used up all the spices and she had to buy all new ones. So she kicked me outside. And that was the best gift to me. She gave me some old pie tins, some old measuring spoons, an old hand beater. And I would just spend a lot of time outside in our little Brooklyn backyard, mixing up kind of concoctions and potions. Nothing that I ever ate or drank. And I knew that. But just
Okay,
imagining that
that's
I
where
was
we clearly are on different intellectual levels. I, on the other hand, created some of these, but I ingested them as well, which turned out to be a learning experience as my mother held me over the toilet and I was throwing up the concoctions. But so
That's
you were
funny.
clearly a brighter child than I was.
Well, I got to admit, Scott, I had my stomach pumped a few times when I was a kid.
I think
But
you need to. Other children
I
should have their stomach pumped and a cast.
I know. I mean, I ate some house plants when I was very young, and that's one of the times I got my stomach pumped. And I drank my mother's favorite, very expensive French perfume that I just got drunk and got sick. I kind of remember that. she was so mad. It was like Christian Dior. But I mean, this is like experiencing the world. It's children involved in their senses. And yeah, so the concoction one is one that you would have to trust that your child wouldn't eat or you would monitor it. So, this was me at about 8 years old, really, mixing these up. And so my dad was a woodworker on his days off. He would go down in the basement and turn bowls and carve and stuff like that. So we had carving stuff. And so he taught me how to carve with a knife. And I included in my book how to make a kind of a stirring stick, which is just a stick kids would carve with a kid style pocket knife or a really sturdy vegetable peeler where you can peel off the ends and kind of make a point. And kids just love that. And it's such a great way of spending time kind of creating something. So you make up this mixture and you stir it up. And I would have little containers that I would pour it in. And so I just put that in the book because I see it when I run kind of free play times with students that I'm working with. They like it. Some people call it a mud kitchen. They might make mud pies and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I like to call it potion making. And I'm about to start working on a book that will have a lot more potions and elixirs for kids in it.
Oh, put me down
That
for a signed first edition if you would. I'm in. So when you're looking at the balance of, I'm gonna call it fairies and more traditional science,
Mhm.
is part of your hope that through these books, through the Forest Magic for Kids and the Book of Fairies, that this will open up curiosity and imagination and will then lead to some, not that you have to give these up, but will then lead to, how does a caterpillar become a butterfly?
Yes.
Or how does a fish swim and not need air above water, or whatever it is? I mean, is that
Yeah.
part of the hope, that you're starting the journey? You're kind of throwing them a ball and a glove
Mhm.
and say, you know what, a year from now, I'll tell you the rules.
Yeah, I mean, yes, as a naturalist, I'm always hoping that we as humans can learn more about how our world works so that we can live with it in a more sustainable way. So, yes, I do. That is a goal of the books. But I think that people can love the natural world in so many different ways. And one might be as through science and being a naturalist and loving herps, or for me, I love mammals. I'm sort of really into tracking and that part. And some people love birds and some people love to identify plants. But there is a lot of people who love creating art based on nature, and maybe they don't know, what tree they're painting, but they're painting it or making a sculpture or writing a book or a poem or composing music that's inspired by it. So I don't necessarily feel like you need to know about the natural world to love it and find inspiration from it and become something in your adult life that values it.
Okay, I think that's great. Let's move on for a moment to the Harris Center for Conservation Education in the remarkable city of Hancock, New Hampshire, which I've got to get a vacation home up there now. First of all, I have friends there, so it's fantastic, and I'd fire it up. There'd be a group I could go hiking with, and anyway, tell me about the Harris Center and your work there.
Sure. Well, first I have to laugh because Hancock is very far from being a city. It doesn't even have a traffic light. There's one store and a library and one cafe, and that's about it. And it's so beautiful. It's incredible. When I was growing up, we would go to the Brooklyn Museum a lot. And in the Brooklyn Museum on the upper floor, they had this exhibit of old New England, and they had this lucite cube with a little village inside the cube. And I would press my head to the cube and think, I just want to go in there. It was like Currier and Ives. It was a scene of people skating on the pond and kids sledding down the hill and a little fire. I mean, and then when I drove through Hancock for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, it's the cube. This is
It's
the town. And
it's
I'm
the
so
town.
so happy to live here. And part of why I live here is because I work for an incredible organization called the Harris Center for Conservation Education. And I've been there for over 35 years now as a naturalist, and their community programs director. And the Harris Center is all about helping people fall in love with the natural world in the place that we live in. So it's really focused on the region that we live in. It's the Monadnock region of New Hampshire, southwestern New Hampshire. The highlands of New Hampshire is what we call it. It's very hilly and rocky, and got a lot of protected land. The Harris Center has protected over 26,000 acres of land in the region. So when you drive through, there's, villages and houses, but then there's a lot of forested land and meadows and wetlands and protected peaks and valleys. It's really beautiful. And my work there is really about working with people of all ages. So people from the very youngest. I run a program called Babies in Backpacks, which has parents bringing kids as young as 7 days old. That was my youngest participant once. All the way lifespan, the belief that no matter where you are in your age or who you are, where you come from, there's always a place and a way to get connected to the natural world. So our programs go from the very youngest to people in retirement facilities, memory care, and assisted living. So really throughout your life, celebrating the natural world, forming those connections, and like I said, falling in love with this world that we live in. So that's my
I
work.
think I think that's spectacular. Between that and your writing and your 14-year-old, it sounds like a very rich and full life filled
It's
with real science, not to diminish the other, but filled with real science and fairies and gnomes and maybe even a
Yes.
couple of giants and
Yeah.
what appears to be a marvelous collection of naturalist friends. I was I was telling first of all, backing up to you'd have to get a street light. I give probably twice a week, I give a presentation by Zoom on a book I wrote called Raptor Quest, where I spent a year chasing every raptor in the lower 48 states. And part of that conversation is the 53rd and final raptor, that's how many we have in the lower 48 states, was a northern hawk owl, which I found in Wise River, Montana. I say I found it. I was directed to it, at least close, and I found it. But I describe it as a town that would have to get a light in order to be a one-light town.
That's right.
And it is so maybe I moved to Hancock instead of Wise River because it appeals to me. I love those things. I think it's
You
great. Now,
Scott, you come to Hancock, you will have a fabulous time. You will
well,
meet
it
all of
sounds
us in
like it.
person.
I'm drawn. I feel like it's a club I wanna be a
That's
member
right.
of, and I couldn't possibly move there unless I wanted to get a divorce because my wife's not going anywhere where the grandchildren aren't.
Well, it's a great place for vacation. So
There
you'll
you
have to
go.
come. You can bring your whole family. There's lots of lakes with little houses you can rent for a couple of weeks,
I'm gonna
and
figure out a
lots of
visit.
naturalists.
I'm gonna figure
Yes.
out now the problem is that you and Julie and Cy and Matt, everybody's so busy getting everybody at one time, but I'm gonna take a shot. Okay.
We would show up for you. And I will just say, so I just have to share last night, the Harris Center has a Saw-Whet Owl banding project where we set up, we're part of OwlNet, which is across this part of New England and down, kind of trying to figure out these very small owls. They're so tiny. They're like this big. They fit inside a tomato paste can when we weigh them.
Wait,
And
okay, I have to tell you because I talk about Northern Saw-Whet banding. Scott Weidensaul
yes, yeah.
does this, and a gentleman named Scott Rashid in Rocky Mountain National Park. And I describe because I've been to the banding stations, and I describe it as the orange juice concentrate can
Yes.
from when we were a kid. I used to just open them and eat it with a spoon, but because they're cardboard and the same size as a Coke can, that's what these little guys fit
Yes,
in. So this
yes,
this is great. Tomato paste, I will add that to my
tomato paste.
presentation,
Well,
that there are a variety of cans that you can shove this owl into.
somebody just sent us a picture from Scotland where they don't have the saw-whet, but they have a similar species, and they were weighing them in the top of a Glenfiddich, which is Scotch container, and I thought that was so funny. We've
You know
got
what?
tomato
I'm not
paste.
moving to Hancock. I'm moving to Scotland.
I'll meet you there.
I'm not a huge fan of tomato paste. However, a good scotch You've got me.
Well, yeah. I mean, but so the Saltwood Owl Banding Project, we open it up to the public 4 times during our season, and it is so magical. And there were 2 people, one guy actually from Scotland. This was his 8,000th and something lifeless bird. And then a young man from Boston, he must have been in his early 20s. He's on his 1,100th bird. And they came just to see the saw-whet because they're very hard to find on your own. So, a
Mhm.
banding station is one way to find them. And it's so magical. Maybe when you come visit, you should come during banding season.
I would absolutely love that, and I love northern solids. I will tell you that in Rocky Mountain National Park, Scott Rashid, who helped me with my project of finding all 53, in 1 week got me on a northern saw-whet, a flammulated,
Oh,
a boreal, and a northern pygmy owl. In
oh,
1 week, he got me on all 4 of those birds.
that is so cool. Scott, when you come up to Hancock, I'm already planning for you, and now I'm wearing my community programs director. You can do a talk at the Harris Center on your book and your podcast. Be perfect.
I would love to do that. That will be a great excuse. You know what? I'm gonna
Yes.
find an excuse. I'm going to find a time in my schedule. I will share this. I'm working on a book called American Safari Zoos Without Fences. And the
Love that.
idea is that there are 30 places in the country that if you go at the exact time to the exact location, you are guaranteed to see an animal, as close to guaranteed as you are at a zoo. So an elephant seal in January in Central California, or, 6 of the 30 are raptors. The rest are
Love it.
megafauna split between marine and terrestrial.
Wait, I have one for you if you haven't
Okay.
done it yet. You can also come. The Harris Center runs a salamander crossing brigade. It is a phenomenal program. We cross over thousands of amphibians every spring. I think last year we crossed over 7,000. I don't know. I can't remember this year's number, but if you come on a big night, a rainy night, you could help cross over these totally gorgeous, they look like bathtub toys. The spotted salamander, black salamander with these full moon yellow spots all over its body. And it is amazing. We have road closures. People come and cross all these salamanders across these roads. So you can come. That's in April. It will be cold and rainy. So bring your raincoat and your galoshes. But you are guaranteed to see one of these phenomenal salamanders and plus wood frogs, spring peepers, and other types of salamanders.
So here is the danger in meeting somebody like you, and the blessing and the danger of doing this podcast twice a week. I already have 2 pages of notes of crap that I've got to do based on our conversation. The number of books that I'm reading to try to keep up with my guests, and the number of events like this that I'm writing down and trying to get out and do and see is just amazing. It is such a blessing. There is so much there,
So
so many
much.
things to see and do. And I will be getting up that way. I have to make a point of it. But part of it is I have to go to all 30 of these locations for the book I'm writing because I won't write about it if I haven't seen them.
Yeah.
So last month, for example, I was in Colorado, both for the bird banding. I've gone now 4 years in a row
Oh,
to
wow.
hang out with Scott. And on the first night, we got a saw-whet and a boreal.
Oh,
So
my
that was
goodness.
spectacular. They've now been shut down because of the government shutdown, but a whole different story, whole
Yeah.
different podcast. But I went for the elk rutting in Rocky Mountain National Park.
What?
And I will throw a picture up now. But Susie, my wife and I drive into the park. We were down in Breckenridge for a while. I've got family down there, and I was trying to find a white-tailed ptarmigan, which is my nemesis bird. I don't believe they exist. I think they're in the
A
category of
fairy.
fairies and gnomes and giants. They're only in my mind, but nonetheless. And then we're driving up to Estes Park, which is the gateway of Rocky Mountain National Park. And as we're driving in, off on the left-hand side of Estes Lake, there is a park. It's a park for kids. It's soccer fields and little league fields and whatnot. But I said to my wife, I think I see some elk over there. And they do roam in the town of Estes Park. And let's go stop and look. So we go, we stop, we park. It's the middle of the day, the middle of the afternoon. It's September 15th, which is kind of the unofficial opening of rut season and the official opening of the banding, the owl banding.
Y-
We get out, and sure enough, there is a giant bull elk, and it's got a harem of about 30. And it's on the field. It's on a little league field. This is
Wow.
where this guy has said, you know where the harem's going tonight? While we're there, Another bull crosses the highway, swims across Estes Lake, comes up and
Wow.
trumpets, and these two go to battle in the lake.
No,
And
I'm coming with you. This
I will
sounds
throw the
great.
picture up here. We got to watch them battle 3 times, these 2 giant, massive, unbelievably fantastic bulls. At one point, they were both completely underwater. They drove each other underwater, and all you could see was a little bit of the top of the furthest from their head, horns and antlers. And there they were, and we got to
Oh,
watch this. And I'm
wow.
thinking, and the thing is, I don't care if it's that or salamanders at midnight in a rainstorm in Hancock. There is so much for us to see as adults and to share with children.
It's so
So,
true.
that being the case, what's next? What you had started to talk about the book you're working on. Tell me about what the plan. Doesn't sound like you're ever going to leave the Harris Center. They're going to,
I do love my work at the Harris Center, and it really informs my writing. And when I'm not writing for kids, I write for Yankee Magazine and Northern Woodlands Magazine, and I just love writing. I always have. But my new books that I'm working on, I gotta say that in plural, is I'm tentatively thinking of it as green magic. It'll be part of the series of Forest Magic for Kids and the Book of Fairies, and hopefully have the same incredible illustrator, Renia Matilio, who's from Greece. And she really brings my words alive with her very charming and whimsical and gorgeous pictures,
and they are
illustrations.
beautiful, by the way.
Yeah,
They're
and
really, really beautiful.
they're really stunning. My publishing company, Gibbs Smith, is amazing. They're just a wonderful group of people to work with, and so that's something I'm thinking of is working on a green magic, which will be really about plants. It'll have potions and elixirs and types of art and kind of sound experiences you can have. So look for that few. And then I'm working on a middle grade novel, which I've been working on for a long time. And maybe one day I'll finish it and it will come out in the world.
Well, I hope that you do. I
Thank you.
like you, I love writing. In the last 10 years, I've published 50 something books.
What?
I write all the time, and if it strikes my interest, I write it.
Yeah,
And I love it, and it's
me
a
too.
great way to express myself. Clearly,
Yeah,
I don't have trouble talking. I can ramble forever, but I also like I love storytelling. My little
me
business
too.
card, that's my title, storyteller.
Yeah,
I
me too.
I think it's magical. Okay, as we're drawing to a close, I'm gonna throw my email up here. If you've got any questions for me, send me an email. I'm happy to answer them. Got any questions for Susie, send it to me, and I'll forward it to Susie.
Thank
And
you.
especially if you have a secret little question about a fairy or a gnome, you might wanna
Exactly.
we'll send her a note. Now, Susie, I have asked you for a book that you would recommend to the audience, something that's nature-based that you think they would benefit by reading.
Well, my new favorite book is, I have to say, Cy Montgomery and Matt Patterson's new picture book, The True and Lucky Life of a Turtle. I love that book. It is such a story of hope about a turtle who gets hit by a car. And this is a true story of Fire Chief, there, this really incredible snapping turtle that ended up hit and got rescued and went through physical therapy and now resides in a nearby pond, and I've gone swimming with Fire Chief, and I'm just a big
You may
fan.
have you may have interrupted my podcast with Cy because I had promised her an hour, and at, like, the hour
That's
25
true.
mark, she said, "Scott, I am so sorry, but there are people in my living room, and we're going swimming with Fire Chief."
It was me.
It was you, so
It was
you're the
me.
one that cut my Cy Montgomery podcast short.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
it
I
was.
knew it would be part of that Hancock gang.
Yeah, we do crazy things like that. I mean, I think that book that Cy and Matt just put out, The True and Lucky Life of a Turtle, is it's such a story for now. It's a story of hope. This turtle, we can, all of us have seen or know turtles that have gotten hit by cars, and this turtle, it's still living. It's being living this life out. It was healed. It can't be released into the wild because its hind legs don't work, but it's cared for. It's having this really cared for place that it's living in, and it's very wild, and it's not a pet. It's not something. I mean, I say we went swimming with Fire Chief. I have to say, I don't swim close to Fire Chief. I took the photographs, but
I've
yeah,
seen
and
them. Sai sent me pictures the next day
Yeah, those were
after
my
you forced her to abandon my podcast.
yeah. I think it's written beautifully, and Matt's illustrations, I mean, he is so talented. It looks like the turtle is just going to crawl off the page and right into your living room. So, if
I
you haven't
had
read it
Matt on. I'll put a note up on what the date was, but I did have Matt on here as a guest as well, and watching him tear up a little bit as he's talking about Fire Chief is a
yeah.
pretty cool thing. Now, here's my follow-up to that question, because you're cheating. It appears to me that all of my guests are either going to recommend Sai's book or Amy Tan's Backyard Chronicles book. So I'm gonna ask you to give me I will definitely put another picture. It's up more than my logo is Sai's book or Sai and Matt's book, but pick a second one. Pick
Alright,
something
alright.
pick
I do
something
have a
else.
second book that I just finished. I loved reading Northwoods by Daniel Mason. It's a
Say the title again, please.
Northwoods.
Okay.
It's a work of fiction. It's beautifully written. Like, his writing was just lush and beautiful about place. And it's about one place, a home, a spot through a course of time. And it's the one steady thing in the story over this course of historical time of all the different people that come into this one place. And if you haven't read that, I really recommend it. It got a lot of attention. It took me a while to read it because I'm always so busy outside and read a lot of kids' books, so I don't always read adult books. But that book was worth reading. It's even got ghosts in it, something that again we don't see, but maybe some of us believe in.
Or maybe more of us should. You know what? Do me a favor when we're done. Text me or email me your
Sure.
address. I'm going to mail you a copy of my children's book, Isaac and
Yes,
Iggy.
please.
Since you read children's books, I will send you a copy. This is my book, Isaac and Iggy, which
Oh,
I
yeah.
I so loved writing. I fell in love with this, and I plan on doing more.
Love
So
it.
we can share that, and I'll sign it and send it to you and be
Oh my
happy to
goodness.
do so. And you're
Thank
gonna
you,
have to
Scott.
sign your books for me. I cannot believe that you mailed me your books, which was very generous, and didn't sign them.
It's weird. I always feel like, oh, am I supposed to sign my book? It's a funny thing. Well, you'll just have to come to Hancock to get them signed.
Okay, I'm running out of pages in my notebook, the things I have to do when I go to a town that 9 people live in and I know 8 of them. Okay,
Well, I mean, and you haven't even met Henry Walters. He is a falconer and has Mahood and forget the other name of his hawk, but they live not that far from Matt. So there again, you've got to come.
Eric
There's more natural.
Masterson and Henry Walters and
Yep,
Julie's husband, and
yep.
yeah, it's, I could do an entire podcast just on Hancock, I
You
think.
could, you could podcast from here, and we'll all join you.
Well, there you go. If you are watching this podcast on YouTube, and I'm thrilled if you are, but if you're listening to it on Apple or Spotify, great. But if you are watching it, do me a favor, take a second and subscribe. There's no cost, there's no time. We don't have ads on this thing. I fund the whole thing because I just want to get out there. And the more people that subscribe, the more people that hear the message like Susie's, and the more guests we can get on the show. So please do that if you would. I'm going to follow this up with a field note. Susie, if you haven't had a chance to watch one of my podcasts, when the podcast is done at the end, I do an 8 or 10-minute segment where I pick an animal or a park or a plant or something and just kind of go off on that a little bit, dig up some fun facts, and it's a fun thing to do. And
Fun.
I want to thank you so much, Susie, not just for the being on the podcast, but for the books that I'll be able to share with my grandchildren, and I'm very excited about that. And so I am
Thank you.
appreciative.
Well,
And as I
Scott,
wrap up, go ahead, please.
I have to thank you. I mean, this was so much fun. My cheeks hurt from smiling.
Well, that's the
I need to go
nicest
back to
compliment.
scowling. My cheeks hurt from smiling so much. I love talking with you. I love your love of the natural world and your desire to get people really interested and connected to
Well,
it.
we share that. And I think that might be the nicest compliment anyone's ever paid me, that their cheeks hurt from laughing. So there you go. And I close every show with this, and I hope you appreciate it. I'm always encouraging people to go out in nature, to go outside and have fun. And by the way, if for reasons that are your own that you can't do that, to Susie's point earlier, get to a window, look outside, open up a door and let some fresh air in. And whatever it is you can do, we can all do different things. But I like to wrap it up with get outside, stay safe, and stay curious. Susie, thank you so much. Have a
Thank you.
great day. Hello and welcome to this edition of Field Notes. Today we're going to move into the world of amphibians. If you are just following this up, after having listened to the Susie Spikol podcast, you'll know that we're going to talk about salamanders. And if you haven't, man, go back and watch it because the one with Susie is a blast. You'll learn about fairies and giants and gnomes and salamanders. It's pretty cool. But let's talk about salamanders. There are roughly 800 different species of salamanders around the world. A quarter of them are in the United States. We've got about 200 different species here in the U.S. And the Appalachian Mountains have more species than anywhere in the world. It is known as the salamander capital of the world. I do not know what other regions it is in battle with for that title, but that is the title. Now, salamanders are really cool animals. Number one, they can regenerate or regrow their limbs and their tails. A lot of people are familiar with like an alligator lizard. If you yank off its tail, it'll grow back, although it comes back a different color, so you can always tell. But not only can a salamander regrow limbs and tails, it can even grow back parts of their eyes or their hearts. So they are amazing. They are lungless, so they breathe through their skin, as many or most amphibians do, but they do not have to open their mouth in order to breathe, which is, I think, a remarkable thing. They do open their mouth, however, to eat, and when they do eat, they eat insects, they eat worms, and they eat slugs. Now, what you don't know, well, we're going to talk about the spotted salamander, all right? That's the one we're going to focus on today. One of the 800 is the spotted salamander, or it's otherwise known as the yellow spotted salamander. Now, this is an eastern U.S. amphibian. As a matter of fact, it's the state amphibian of Ohio and my adopted home state of South Carolina, which I didn't know. I wasn't even sure we had a state amphibian in South Carolina, but we do, and it is the spotted salamander. Now, they are common. There's quite a few of them, but we rarely see them. They're hidden, and that is because they live underground almost the entire year, almost their entire lives. They live underground in these little burrows. They're not tiny. They're 6 to up to 10 inches long, including the tail, and they can live up to 20 years in the wild, probably partially because of the regeneration equipment they've got, but there you go. So all around us on the East Coast, we have these salamanders in the ground, living, eating bugs and insects and all kinds of different things. However, that all changes with the first warm rains of spring. And when those hit, salamanders come up to the surface because it is breeding time. It's their annual migration time. And so they all seem to be triggered by the exact same warm rain. There seems to just be a universal belief that when that hits whatever area they're living in, they all get out of the burrow and they all move. They crawl, they go across roads and across forest floors and whatever it takes. They migrate over to these temporary ponds or pools of water, and this is where they lay their eggs. Now, the vernal means that they are temporary and they'll dry up in the summer, but in the spring, when the rain hits, they're there, and they are perfect places for these spotted salamanders to lay their eggs. They have built-in GPS, just like birds do, and say they go back to the exact same pond every year. Hopefully it's there. Things change, habitat changes. But ideally, their GPS takes them back, and that same pond is filled up with some water, and they drop some eggs. Now, one of the things that's really cool about these guys is their eggs contain green algae. And this is a symbiotic relationship between plant and animal. It's a partnership, and it's highly unusual. The green algae eats the waste that the little baby fetus salamanders produce, and in exchange, the green algae provides oxygen so that the little baby salamander can live. It's a really neat partnership, and they both need each other. So there you go. Now this one, the spotted salamander, has these bright yellow spots. It's beautiful. They're also toxic. Not to humans, they're not going to kill us, but they're toxic enough to deter wannabe predators like snakes and raccoons and gives the salamanders a better chance to survive, either not being dug up by predators or not being predated when they're on their migration to the ponds. Recently, it was discovered that if you put one of these guys under an ultraviolet light, kind of wonder who's doing that, but somebody did, and they fluoresce, they glow, and these yellow spots become a bright greenish blue under fluorescent lights. Now, again, if you're following up from the Susie Spikol podcast. She mentioned this, but I want to go over it because I think it's kind of fun. She works at the Harris Center for Conservation Education. This is located at Hancock, New Hampshire, which is also the home not only to Susie, but to two other of our podcast guests, Cy Montgomery and Matt Patterson. It's quite a town for naturalists. But in the spring, they do something called a crossing brigade, because now these salamanders that historically did not have to cross roads now do, and they don't do well underneath car tires. And so they actually close off some of the roads during this season, and they have amphibian road crossings, and they will train you to help. You can come out at night. Susie said to warn you that it gets a little chilly, wear a raincoat because they're doing it in the rain. But they're trying to save these amphibians. And since 2007, so in fewer than 20 years, they have saved 100,000 amphibians, which is pretty cool. I'm really hoping to go in April. I would love to see this. I'd love to meet Susie in person. I'd love to see the salamanders. I'd love to see if I can help save some. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this field notes. Salamanders are a blast, just one of the amazing creatures. When I was doing my research for this, I learned a lot about them. The regeneration, the glowing, the living underground, the breathing through their skin. This is what makes this so fun for me, is to go through and learn all of these new things about these animals that I just kind of, someone says salamander, I go, yep, yeah, I've seen salamanders, okay. But you dive into them a little bit. And by the way, a tiny, 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 tiny little bit, but nonetheless enough to make it really interesting. So I want to thank you for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, man, subscribe. We're trying to get as many subscribers as we can. Everyone we get helps us spread the message out to more people. YouTube starts to spread the message. They take us seriously, and we bring in more guests. If you've got a comment or if you liked it, drop that as well. And as I like to say at the end of all of these, if you're out there in nature, and I hope that you are, but if you're out there in nature, hiking, walking, camping, whatever it is you're doing, stay safe and stay curious. Thanks for listening. Have a terrific day.